and welcome to Elyria Public Library's In Conversation. Today we have author Cindy Kolbe with us, who will be talking about her book and what's been going on since her book was published. So welcome, Cindy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I grew up in Lorraine, and then I raised my kids in Tiffin, Ohio, a little town not too far from here. And, I had worked with people with disabilities in my work career at the Tiffin Developmental Center, and then also I managed group homes. But I never imagined. You hear about how life can change in an instant. I never thought that would happen to me, and it did. Back in 2000, I was driving home. We had gone to Columbus to hear my son sing in the choir there. He was a freshman, and on the way home, it was late at night. It was close to midnight. We were driving from Columbus to Tiffin, Ohio, and I fell asleep at the wheel. Car flipped 3 times, and my youngest daughter sustained a spinal cord injury, a severe one, injury in her neck, which left her quadriplegic. So literally just in a few moments time, her life changed forever, but also mine and so many of the people in my family. Thankfully, we can say today we're all in a great place. We're all doing very well, but obviously you can imagine the challenges at that time and going forward.
Mm-hmm. So can you give us a little insight of like where your book starts and then your journey through to the end? And I mean, obviously it's not, like you said, the end of your story, because here you are,
Right.
and you said
Yes.
everybody's doing great. So if you could tell
Yes.
our readers a little bit more about the Struggling with Serendipity book that you wrote.
Yes, and I'll also tell you a little bit about why that title fits so well. I had been diagnosed with clinical depression before my daughter's injury, and as you can imagine, after, it was the most difficult time I've had in my life, not only with depression, but with guilt over causing the accident. And so trying to hide it all, because I felt at the time Beth was going through major challenges with her body and figuring out how to use it again, how to use her hands, how to move. And I didn't want anybody worrying about me. So part of my challenge was not only dealing with the depression and guilt, but hiding it. So that was the struggling part. At the same time, incredible things started happening for my daughter Beth. She was 14 at the time, volleyball player. Of course, that was not in the cards anymore, but she was able to look forward and kind of see life through the lens of challenge, like what can I do now to be more independent? That was her goal, to be more independent. Nobody thought she could be. She was a C6-7 quadriplegic, which means she didn't have finger function. So for someone who can't use their hands, it's not typical that they can achieve total independence. But she was one of the lucky ones. 4 years later, she was able to do that. But along the way, and this is the serendipity part, that so many incredible things were happening to her, and then also to me and my family. One of the bylines for the book is from a small town in Ohio to Seattle, Harvard, Capitol Hill, and around the world. And that kind of sums it all up in a real general way. But it's a pretty incredible story.
Good. Can you tell us why you decided to write it and share your story with the
Yes,
world?
yes. For the first 10 years after Beth's injury, I couldn't think about writing about it, even though I've always enjoyed writing, and in all my jobs, I was writing. But when that 10-year mark hit, there was like a switch flipped or something for me. And then it was, I really felt I needed to share this story. I had to share this story. So I started writing. It was an 8-year process. And most of those years, it was steady work on the book. It was, I really wanted to try to get it right. It
Mhm.
felt like a big responsibility to tell this. Um, it's all from my point of view, but I also used Beth's writings and quotes to kind of get a glimpse of what she was going through at the time also. Um, in 2019, my book was published with a traditional publisher, and I was able to get a coast to coast tour in before COVID, which was really wonderful to connect with so many readers and um, get to know people, get to meet people.
Can you tell people who maybe are, we do have quite a few local authors here. Can you
Mhm.
tell us what your writing process was like, and then also provide some tips on like how to share such a personal story?
Yes, it's a big challenge. And for anyone who's taken any kind of writing course, a phrase that you often hear is show, don't tell. Makes a lot of sense. If you're reading a book, you want to see the scene,
Mhm.
that you're reading about. You want to kind of understand uh, all the senses that are involved in experiencing what you're experiencing. You want to convey that in your book. Well, yeah, that sounds great, but it's very difficult to do. It's much easier to say I did this and then I went here and that's the way it was.
Mhm.
So I did some writing courses, classes, I guess you could say, and spent a lot of time rewriting. I mean, I had a finished draft maybe after 2 years, but now is a much different book than it was at that point. I think my advice is for people interested in sharing their story is to show, don't tell, as much as possible, but also to not give up. For example, I was going the traditional publishing route, so I was contacting literary agents uh, to try to get them interested in my story and then for them to sell it to a publisher. Well, it wasn't until I had I had sent 58 query letters out to publishers, mainly literary agents, but some publishers, before I was offered a contract. Um, and I have friends who just kind of gave up after the first 10, or even sometimes you don't even get a response, let alone a negative response or whatever. So
Mhm.
it can be discouraging, to send out those letters and to get a rejection.
Mhm.
But it's such a competitive business. Everybody's looking for something a little different than the next. So
Mhm.
I think the advice is if it's a story that you believe in and you really want to see it out there, um, keep at it, but also get advice from some experts too, where you can cut down on the time it might take to see it in print.
Thank you for those tips. So
Oh, sure.
revisiting the story itself, can
Sure.
you, well, let's hear some more tips possibly that you may have for parents who have children with physical disabilities who are transitioning to something more independent, like Beth going to college.
Right. That was a huge step Beth was injured at 14. She was mostly independent when she was getting ready to go to college. Um, and it's a kind of another whole story, but I won't get into it. But she ended up going to Harvard. It was really wild, and nobody in my family had ever gone to an Ivy League. So then we had the added challenge for her of sending her to Cambridge, Massachusetts from Tiffin, Ohio. How do you do that with any child, any young adult, uh, let alone someone in a wheelchair who isn't quite ready to be on her own? So Beth asked me to go with her for her first year. I lived off campus. She was on. That arrangement worked for us. There also are many teenagers with a disability who are able to work out having a personal care assistant in their dorm room to assist them. Right, so that works for a lot of people. There's also many good resources, and actually I have a bunch on my website. My website is www.strugglingwithserendipity.com. And one of those resources, particularly for college, is a friend of mine. It runs it. It's accessiblecollege.com, and she on her website she has a lot of tips and advice. Also, I think it's challenging, regardless of whether even a teenager has a disability or not, a young adult going to college, but it's very possible. And I would really encourage people to think big and to not feel limited with your opportunities, because there still are many possibilities out there for anyone.
Great. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about where you and Beth are at today and how your struggle affects your daily outlook on life?
Yes. In the process of writing the book, I was able to come to terms with my mental health and my depression. And for the first time, I was sharing more with my family. There were things in the book that they weren't even aware of because I hid it from them, and they felt they felt bad about it, that they didn't realize how difficult that time was for me. But I'm quick to tell them they didn't know because I didn't want them to know.
Mhm.
And I, but I, in the process of writing the book, I was able to be able to talk about it and even share, and even sharing with you today that,
Mhm.
I struggle with depression. That was a difficult step for me. I was very private about it, but in doing so, I've gotten involved with mental health nonprofits, and it's really important for people to know that they're not alone, and that there is help, and to, if you help, ask for it, and keep asking if you're not getting the help you need. I'm a mentor for several moms of kids with spinal cord injuries, and that's one of the things I talk about with them. Especially soon after an injury, it's a difficult time for everyone. And it's very important that, yes, of course, our kids and their injuries are our priority and our focus. But at the same time, if we're caregivers, we need to take care of ourselves too.
Mhm. Great. Thank you. Can you tell me what the future holds for the story and the book of Struggling with Serendipity?
Yes, yes. And I'll back up just a little bit to let you know what we're doing today. Um, Beth is a lawyer in DC, and she's a healthcare policy lawyer. Um, she got married in 2020, and she's the happiest person I know. She is loving life. and she has since her injury. And she still travels a lot, loves to travel with her husband, not COVID, but before then, and they're looking forward to traveling more. Um, she has a great attitude that she's not going to let her wheelchair get in the way. So she, which anyway, she that had there's some stories in the book where that confidence sometimes can get you into trouble a little bit as a wheelchair user, but um, it's all generally been so positive, and she's found so many opportunities, uh, so much serendipity in her life because of, I think, she's been open to it, and her outlook is a positive one. I'm kind of enjoying a semi-retirement, and I have my first grandchild. Uh, my other daughter, Maria's first, and I'm living in Boston since Maria and her husband are in Boston, so that's been fun. Uh, my grandson is 4 months old now and is just a joy every day. Um, there are exciting things in the future too. I signed a movie contract with an experienced movie producer. She wrote a screenplay for my book, and she'll be shopping it to movie studios in Hollywood. And she's pretty confident this is going to happen. So I don't know. It may or may not, but she has the rights for the movie. She bought the rights, and now we're just kind of waiting to see if she can work it out with a movie studio. And yeah, it's been kind of funny because of course we have family conversations. Well, who would play who?
Right.
It's kind of funny,
Well, that's exciting.
yeah, it is, and it's something I never thought about. I wanted to see a book in print. Oh, and I guess I could show you. Struggling with
There it is.
Serendipity. It has a picture of Beth and me at Harvard, and there's a foreword by a Harvard doctor. Uh, that's great. Um, so we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah, we'll be looking for it then too.
Yes,
It wouldn't be a library interview, I feel like, if I didn't ask you what you were reading and if you have any book
yes.
recommendations for our viewers.
Oh yes, I always do. I'm always reading, and I always have recommendations. I love memoirs like mine, that genre. Um, but what I've been drawn to lately uh, are some pretty great fantasy books. Erin Morgenstern wrote The Starless Sea, and also another book I love, The Night Circus.
Mhm.
And I was
One
I
of
was
my
lucky
favorites.
enough. Yes, yes. I was lucky enough to go to one of her book events in DC, and that was fun too to hear her talk about it and her process.
Mhm.
They're very imaginative books and fun books.
Mhm. It's funny that you mentioned that because I had read The Night Circus when it first came out, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for
Yes,
Erin to write another
me
book,
too.
and it was like 10
Right.
years later. So
Yes.
I picked up The Starless Sea as well, and it is actually
Mhm.
just sitting next to my bed, so it's on my pile to read,
Yes. Oh, I think
and I
you'll
just
enjoy
can't
it.
wait. Do you
Right.
have any recommendations for books besides Erin? Like how you said genres. Do you have any other genres that you get into?
I'm reading. Uh, I'm rereading the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, and my daughter Beth, the one who uses a wheelchair, she's rereading it at the same time. So that's kind of fun. We're kind of comparing what we thought about different books. We're kind of doing our own little book club, which is
Yeah.
fun.
Well, thank you,
Yes.
Cindy, so much for joining us today. So in the links below, you will be able to see a link to Struggling with Serendipity in the catalog. So if you'd like to put a hold on it, you can. And then we'll also link to the books that we mentioned for recommendations as well. So Cindy, thanks
Mhm.
again for joining us, and thank you everybody for our very first in conversation with a author in the area. So everybody
Yeah.
make sure you check out our YouTube channel for more videos and virtual programs. Thanks, Cindy. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.